Hi, my name is Tin Liang. I have a PhD in neuroscience and I have an undergrad degree from UT for psychology and biology. And I'm currently working in the field of workforce development, talent development, education, and I'm currently self-employed as a consultant. My first job after my PhD was to do a postdoc. And I was drawn to continuing to do bench research because I had a hypothesis. I was very driven to understand the intersection between neurodegeneration and obesity. And what I learned in that role was actually more about supporting people. I think it was my first role where I'm put in a mentorship role with other graduate students and other undergrads and technicians. And besides teaching them the technical aspects, I really learned about what it's like to celebrate different people's experiences and how they do rigorous science and to celebrate their specific excellence. I learned a lot about humility because there was a lot that I still didn't know, right? In sciences, you tend to go more narrow into a niche. And so it's a lot about understanding that there's a lot of growth in training and to see everyone in their light and in their path, and to learn to be a person in the workplace. And that's what I have taken with me in the work that I continue to do. So the most interesting projects that I'm currently working on, I'll talk about two, and how my science skills really prepared me for that. So one interesting project I'm working on is writing a grant with a farmer to build greenhouses to help support the community where there's a lot of food insecurity. And that, I think, is kind of an obvious skill, the grant writing piece itself, learning how to communicate and talk with him to understand his vision for it, who his stakeholders are, although they're quite different than in the realm that we're looking at, that I'm typically looking at in the sciences. It's talking to the program officer and knowing what kinds of questions to ask. I think that's a key one, knowing what kinds of questions to ask, looking at how to read the grants themselves and what are the gaps in knowledge that I could find other resources for. It's replying to reviewers. I think that's the most underrated skill that scientists get. Thank you so much for your response. This is how the productive way I'm going to respond to that, instead of like, what are you talking about? I wrote that in there, it's like, thank you so much. And then I would say the other piece is the actual, it's really fun. The ambiguity of trying to find the solution and write for it is exciting. I would say the second project that's super interesting is I'm writing a children's book with a colleague or friend about, a young girl and her experience. And that seems completely different, writing a children's book, and I'm completely new to this. And, it's like the story we wanted to hear, so we're telling the story, and it's all the same things. It's literature search. What's the gap in the field? What stories have been told? What stories haven't yet been told? What angle can you talk? How do you pitch the story to a publisher, which is the same as like pitching a story to a grant person or a publisher? And understanding the mission of that particular agency. So it's like, if you're writing something to the National Institutes of Aging, it's got to be aging focused. If you're writing to the National Cancer Institute, it's be cancer focused. And we're like, oh yeah, our story is all about the thing that you're writing about. And then to another publisher, we're like, oh, our story is all about the thing that you're looking for. And so, and then I would say the number one thing is that I'm learning that I've gotten from science is about rejection. We're getting a lot of rejections, and it kind of feels like I've done it a lot, getting rejected, because you do get rejected a lot when you do all your submissions. And so getting the rejections, rolling with the punches, rewriting it and submitting it again, that process is really familiar from my PhD. So in communicating your unique set of scientific skills to an employer, there's two approaches. One approach is you think about all the skills that you have, and then how do you translate into the employer's language? And you would do this with the assistants side by side with the job ad. So that's one way to do it, kind of a Longula style. And that works for people who are really structured, and it helps them to kind of see the big picture and then narrow down what they want to talk about in different parts of the interview or the resume or the cover letter. Another approach, I would say, is that you want to think about what is unique to you and what do you want the employer to know about you. And that kind of goes for more people who have like an intuition or a gut feeling of, I'm pretty good at building relationships with people. So this is my most recent interview. I actually just had an interview last week. And I was communicating about science. One, because I am a scientist. Two, I naturally love building relationships. It's just something that I enjoy doing. And I love to think about how to support students at all levels of learning. Right? And so you think about your own unique talents, and that is a set that you can then talk about. But I would always say start with a job ad. Start with a job ad, either highlight it using your online tools, your highlighters or circles, or print it out and circle things out. And then again, you look at that and you're like, well, what is it they're looking for? What is it that I can contribute? And then in terms of turning your CV into resume, number one advice is get a template. Just don't start from scratch. Get a template either from your Texas Career Engagement team or meet with a graduate career advisor. And because it is speaking a different language, you're thinking if you're trying to learn a different language, say Italian. I was trying to learn Italian at UT Austin. And, you don't want to start from scratch. You get a worksheet in a sense, and it'll help you to translate that science language into an industry language or a policy, whatever it is that you're looking for. So get some assistance with that with a graduate career advisor. And then it doesn't really matter if you have a master one. I think that's the idea of like a CV. Don't create a master resume. Some people that really appeals to them, again, if you're structured and you're like, it just helps me to see my whole history, go for it. But then other people think about it in terms of, okay, well, if I have a business-focused one or an industry-focused one, that's usually what I see. People who are applying to 2 or 3 similar jobs, just create a focused resume, and that will be helpful to you. Have something that you can work from. For graduate students considering markets outside of academia, I would say that you have lots of places and ways to try out different workplaces and also different bosses. And so for your first job outside of academia, no matter what sector you decide to try out first, find a boss that believes in you and will root for you, because that confidence building in that job and the ability to propel you to the next career is going to be crucial. I would say be good to yourself. Financial stability and duty to your family are really important, whatever that might mean for you and your situation. And so you might not find that perfect job. Most of the time, it's probably going to be just a percentage of the things that you enjoy doing, but it's enough to open doors and open up connections to meeting who you want. So do the thing that you need to do and think of it as an opportunity to build skill, that there's no wrong next step for you. It's just what you learn from it and what you make out of it. And then I would say also that you are a complex whole person. I think about myself, and I like to tell people a story about how I tried to make litmus paper when I was 10 years old, because I wanted to test if our rain was acid rain. I'd learned something on TV and I was like, oh my God, whatever rain is acid rain. And so my mom went along with it, bought me some red cabbage. I made myself litmus paper. And that's one thing that gives me an indication that I had a scientific mind at a young age. But I also love to play basketball. I love to line up my stuffed animals and tell them stories. I also loved to ride my bike. So you are a whole complex human being, and there are parts of you that need to speak and sing at different times of your life. And so allow that, let that be. It's a part of your journey. And my last piece of advice is talk to people. And it might be awkward at first, and you might be anxious about what you're gonna say, but you're gonna get better at it. And the only way to learn about people's stories and how they did it, because there's not one way to do things, is to talk to people. And I would say that I still get anxious in meeting new people, and I wonder if I'm going to say the right thing, or if I talk too much, or if I didn't talk enough. But it's okay. Every conversation is a learning experience. And so if that happens to be you, then find someone to introduce you to a friend or a colleague. But your journey is yours.